The hallway was enormous. Taeho had walked through it 100 times over the past 8 years, and it never stopped making him feel small. The walls rose so high that clouds actually formed near the ceiling, tiny wisps of moisture drifting between carved stone pillars that were older than human civilization itself. Alien delegates moved past him in every direction. Some walked on legs, some floated, some dragged themselves forward on limbs that had no name in any human language. Almost none of them looked at him. Jiho walked beside him, carrying a stack of data tablets pressed against his chest. He was younger, still in his late 20s, and Taeho could see the tension in his jaw. This was only Jiho's third grand session. He had not yet learned how to hide his feelings in this place. "You are grinding your teeth again," Taeho said, without looking at him. Jiho forced his jaw to relax. "Sorry, sir. Just do not let them see it." They reached the great assembly hall. It was a circular chamber so wide that the far side looked hazy with distance. Thousands of seats rose in layered rings around a central platform where the Grand Arbiter would speak. Each species had an assigned section. The powerful civilizations sat near the center, close to the platform, where their voices carried weight. The newer, smaller, weaker species sat further out. Earth's delegation sat in the very last ring, behind even the Pilkari, a fungal species that had been admitted to the Council only 11 years ago. Taeho had once asked why Earth was seated so far back after 60 years of membership. The answer he received was that seating was based on civilizational contribution metrics. He never asked again. They took their seats. Jiho arranged the data tablets neatly. Around them, the hall filled with noise. Thousands of alien voices blended together into a deep hum that vibrated in Taeho's chest. A deep tone rang through the chamber, and silence followed. Grand Arbiter Voron rose onto the central platform. He was Thesic, an insectoid species that had helped found the Council over 4,000 years ago. His body was tall and thin, covered in plates of dark brown shell, and his 4 eyes gleamed like wet stones under the light. When he spoke, his voice was amplified to fill the entire hall, and it carried the slow, heavy authority of someone who had led the galaxy for over 3 centuries. "We gather once more as a family of civilizations," Voron began, "bound by our shared commitment to peace, order, and progress." Taeho listened without expression. He had heard this speech, or something very close to it, every single year. The words were beautiful. They meant nothing. The session moved through its agenda. Trade agreements between major powers. A border dispute between 2 species Taeho had never met. A funding proposal for a new research station. Each item was discussed, debated, and resolved with the smooth efficiency of a system that worked perfectly for those it was designed to serve. Earth's 3 proposals were listed at the very bottom of the agenda. Hours passed. Jiho shifted in his seat. Taeho sat perfectly still. Finally, near the end of the session, when many delegates had already begun private conversations, and some had left entirely, Voron glanced at his display and said, "We have 3 remaining items from the Earth delegation." Taeho stood. He straightened his coat. He walked down the long aisle toward the speaking platform, and his footsteps were the loudest sound in the chamber. When he reached the platform, he looked out at the assembly. Thousands of alien faces, most of them not even paying attention. "Thank you, Grand Arbiter," Taeho said. "Earth respectfully submits 3 proposals for consideration. First, a renegotiation of trade tariffs under Treaty 87. Earth currently pays 4 times the standard rate imposed on comparable civilizations. Second, a petition to extend our territorial corridor by 1 star system to accommodate our growing population. Third, a formal complaint regarding illegal mining operations conducted by the Kalori Dominion within Earth's designated asteroid belt, permitted through a loophole in Treaty 112. He paused. The silence that followed was not the silence of consideration. It was the silence of boredom. Then Delegate Rutha stood. He was Kalori, a broad-shouldered reptilian species with thick green scales and a mouthful of teeth that he enjoyed showing when he smiled. He represented one of the galaxy's oldest military powers, and he had never once hidden his disdain for humans. "Grand Arbiter," Rutha said, and his voice was loud and almost cheerful. "Must we do this every year? The humans come here, they complain, they beg for scraps, and we waste our time listening. They are half-evolved carbon noise. They should be grateful that this council even allows them to sit in this hall, even if it is in the back where they belong." Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough. Tejo watched it ripple through the chamber. Some delegates covered their mouths politely. Others did not bother. Voron raised one long, segmented hand for silence. "The proposals from Earth are noted," he said, in a tone that made it very clear they would not be acted upon. "However, due to insufficient civilizational standing and procedural requirements under Section 9, they cannot be advanced at this time. The session is concluded." That was it. 60 years of membership. 3 reasonable requests. Dismissed in less than 2 minutes. Tejo nodded once, turned, and walked back up the long aisle. He did not let his expression change. Behind him, the hall was already filling with casual conversation, as if nothing had happened. Because to them, nothing had. Jiho was waiting at their seats. His hands were shaking. His eyes were wet with anger. Tejo sat down beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," he said quietly. They left the station together in silence. On the shuttle back to their ship, Tejo opened his personal communication device and typed a single encrypted word. He sent it to one address on Earth, a frequency that officially did not exist. The word was confirmed. 12 hours later, in a command center buried deep beneath a mountain on Earth, a woman named Yuna stood in front of a wall-sized display. The display showed the positions of 312 alien civilizations, their fleets, their trade routes, their communication networks. All of it mapped with a precision that would have horrified the Council if they knew it existed. She read the message. She read it again. Then she set down her tablet, looked at the officers standing behind her, and said, "Begin final phase." No one in the room smiled. This was not a moment for celebration. It was the moment they had spent 60 years dreading and preparing for in equal measure. The calm surface of the lake was about to break. Tejo arrived on Earth 2 days later. The shuttle descended through gray clouds over the Pacific Ocean and landed on a platform that did not appear on any map. An elevator took him 300 meters underground, into a facility known only as the Room. It had no official name because it did not officially exist. They were all waiting for him. Yuna sat at the head of a long steel table, her posture rigid, her dark eyes sharp. Beside her was Hana, the lead engineer, who looked like she had not slept in several days. Fleet Admiral Sunwoo stood near the wall with his arms crossed, his silver hair cut short and his face carved with the kind of lines that come from decades of carrying secrets. Nari, the intelligence chief, sat quietly at the far end of the table, watching everyone with the patient attention of someone who had spent her career studying people. And at the center of it all, behind a simple desk, sat Secretary General Do-hyun. He was an older man, soft-spoken, with kind eyes that hid a mind sharper than most people realized. "Tell us everything," Do-hyun said. So Tejo told them. He described the session, the laughter, the dismissal, the look on Rutha's face when he called humanity carbon noise. He kept his voice even. He reported it the way he would report the weather. When he finished, the room was silent for a long time. Do-hyun folded his hands on the desk. Is there any diplomatic path remaining? No, sir, Taeho said. There never was. The system was designed from the beginning to keep species like us permanently beneath them. Every treaty we signed was a chain. They just made the chains look like gifts. Do-hyun turned to Yuna. Show me where we stand. Yuna stood and activated the wall display. What appeared was not a simple military briefing. It was the result of 60 years of secret, patient, and deeply calculated preparation. A project that had begun before most people in this room were born. A project called Stillwater. It had started in year 5, after first contact. The early ambassadors had returned from the council, broken and disillusioned. The treaties Earth had signed in good faith turned out to be traps. The trade terms were designed to drain Earth's resources. The technology sharing agreements required Earth to give everything and receive nothing. The military restrictions ensured Earth could never grow strong enough to challenge the system. And the territorial limits locked humanity into a tiny corridor of space, unable to expand. Earth's leaders at the time faced a choice. They could accept their place and remain small forever. Or they could do something that required a kind of courage most civilizations never develop. They could pretend to accept while quietly building something unstoppable. They chose the second option, and they gave it a name. Stillwater. Be the calm surface of a lake, while building a tsunami underneath. In year 12, a young physicist named Hana was pulled out of her university and brought to a hollowed-out asteroid hidden deep in the Oort cloud, far beyond the reach of any alien scanner. There she joined a team of 300 scientists working on Project Black Tide, a weapons development program that violated at least 14 council treaties. Over the next 20 years, they built things that the galaxy's oldest civilizations had declared impossible. Faster-than-light weapons, gravitational disruption technology, shields that could absorb energy that would crack a moon in half. Hana looked at Do-hyun across the table. Black Tide has been fully operational for 2 years, sir. We were waiting for the order. In year 20, Nari had begun something even more dangerous than weapons. She built a network. Hundreds of human operatives were placed on alien worlds. They worked as traders, teachers, students, and researchers. They learned languages, customs, and secrets. They mapped military bases, supply chains, political weaknesses, and classified technologies. They did this for 40 years, and not once were they discovered. The galaxy did not look closely at humans. That was their greatest gift to Earth's cause. Nari tapped her tablet. I have operatives on 206 worlds. Every one of them is ready to move on my signal. In year 31, a young captain named Sun Woo was given command of the first Shadow Fleet. These were warships built in the dark spaces between stars, in places so empty that no one ever thought to look. The ships were fast, silent, and powerful beyond anything the Council had ever encountered. By year 40, there were 12 shadow fleets. By year 55, there were 40. An entire armada, hiding in the void, crewed by men and women who had volunteered to live in darkness for decades, waiting for a day that might never come. Sun Woo unfolded his arms. 40 fleets, over 6,000 vessels, all in position. And perhaps most remarkably, in year 58, Earth scientists had surpassed every known civilization in 3 critical fields: quantum encryption, gravitational manipulation, and biological engineering. They published fake research papers showing slow, stumbling progress. They attended alien academic conferences and asked basic questions. They performed the role of the struggling newcomers so perfectly that no one ever suspected the truth. Humanity was not behind. Humanity was so far ahead that the gap itself had to be hidden. Yuna finished the briefing and turned off the display. The room was quiet again. The weight of what they had built pressed down on all of them. He looked at each face. These were people who had given their lives to a plan most of them would never get credit for. A plan built on silence, patience, and the willingness to be laughed at for 60 years. If we do this, Dokhyun said slowly, there is no going back. We will be declaring to the galaxy that everything they believed about us was a lie. Some of them will be afraid. Some will be angry. Some will want war. Some already want war, Sunwoo said. The Kailori have wanted to crush us for decades. The only thing that stopped them was the belief that we were not worth the effort. And when they learn the truth? Dokhyun asked. Then they will learn it, Taiho said simply. Dokhyun was silent for a very long time. He stared at the surface of the table as if he could see through it, through the rock, through the earth, all the way down to the core of the planet. When he looked up, his eyes were heavy but clear. Begin Operation Sunrise, he said. Withdraw from all 197 treaties, effective immediately. No one cheered. No one celebrated. Hana closed her eyes for a moment. Jiho, who had been standing silently by the door the entire time, let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. Taeho nodded once. Then he stood and began to prepare for the hardest speech of his life. The surface of the lake was about to shatter, and the galaxy had no idea what was underneath. It was an ordinary morning on the council station. Delegates drifted through the corridors in small groups, discussing minor trade adjustments and cultural exchange schedules. The air recyclers hummed softly. Somewhere on the lower levels, a Kailori officer was eating breakfast. Somewhere else, a Munara delegate was reviewing notes for the afternoon session. Nobody was worried about anything. The galaxy was at peace, the way it had been for centuries, and nobody had any reason to believe that today would be different from any other day. Earth's delegation had been absent for 3 days. Nobody noticed, nobody cared. At exactly 9 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time, every communication screen on the station turned on at the same time. Every display in every room, every corridor, every personal device, every emergency panel, they all showed the same thing. The face of a human man in a plain dark uniform, sitting behind a simple desk with a single light above him. His expression was calm, almost gentle, the way a doctor looks before delivering very bad news. Taeho began to speak. My name is Taeho. I am the chief ambassador of the planet Earth. I am speaking to every member of the Galactic Council of Aligned Civilizations. And I am speaking to every inhabited world in this galaxy, in every known language, simultaneously. On the council station, delegates stopped walking. On 100 alien homeworlds, people looked up at their screens. In military command centers and trading posts and university lecture halls across the galaxy, billions of beings heard the same voice at the same time. 60 years ago, humanity was offered membership in this council. We accepted with open hearts and open hands. We signed 197 treaties. We believed we were joining a family. We believed we would be treated as equals. He paused. The silence across the galaxy was total. We were not treated as equals. We were treated as tools. The treaties we signed were designed to drain our resources, restrict our growth, suppress our technology, and ensure that we would never rise above the place assigned to us. We know this because we have spent 60 years documenting every violation, every manipulation, every lie. On the council station, Grand Arbiter Varan was already moving toward the emergency chamber, his long legs carrying him faster than his aides could follow. Rutha had dropped his food and was shouting for a communications officer. Effective immediately, Taeho continued. The planet Earth withdraws from all 197 treaties with the Galactic Council of Aligned Civilizations. Every agreement, every obligation, every restriction. As of this moment, humanity is no longer bound by any term, condition, or clause imposed upon us by this council. He leaned forward slightly. And to those who would respond to this with threats or force, I want to be very clear about something. You do not know us. You have never known us. What you believed about humanity was what we allowed you to believe. The truth is something else entirely. The broadcast ended. The screens went dark. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Then everything happened at once. Voron called an emergency session. Delegates rushed to the assembly hall, some of them still in their sleeping clothes. Rutha stormed to the podium and slammed his fist down so hard that the surface cracked. "This is a tantrum," he roared. "They are children throwing a fit. We will discipline them and be done with it." But even as he spoke, the reports started arriving. On 206 alien worlds, human operatives who had been living quietly among the local populations for decades began to move. They did not attack, they did not sabotage, they simply disappeared, every single one of them within a 2-hour window. But before they left, each operative delivered a data package to the local media networks on their assigned world. The packages contained evidence. 60 years of carefully collected, perfectly organized evidence showing exactly how the Council had exploited not just Earth, but dozens of younger species. Rigged trade terms, stolen technology, manipulated votes, secret agreements between the powerful civilizations to keep the weak ones permanently weak. The evidence spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, protests erupted on 43 worlds. Governments that had trusted the Council began demanding answers. The carefully maintained illusion of galactic unity started to crack. Then came the military shock. Earth's entire territorial corridor, every planet, every station, every ship, went completely dark. A communications blackout unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. No signal could get in, no scanner could penetrate. It was as if humanity had simply erased itself from the map. Ruta did not wait for permission. He ordered the Kalori Third War Fleet, 400 warships strong, to advance on human space, and in his words, remind these animals of their place. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed and arrived at the border of Earth's corridor in less than 6 hours. They were met by Admiral Sunwoo. He was waiting for them. His first shadow fleet materialized out of nothing, ships appearing from the empty darkness of space like ghosts stepping out of a wall. The Kalori sensors screamed warnings. The human ships were using technology that the Council's databases said did not exist, should not exist, could not exist. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. Sunwoo's fleet disabled every single Kalori warship without destroying a single one. No casualties on either side. Every Kalori ship lost power, weapons, and engines simultaneously, left drifting in space like dead fish in still water. Sunwoo sent a single message to the Kalori command frequency. That was a warning. We will not send another. Take your ships. Go home. Tell your leaders what you saw here. The Kalori fleet limped back to their own space. Rutha received the report in silence. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. On the Council station, Voron stood in the emergency chamber surrounded by panicking delegates. Every minute brought worse news. More worlds demanding answers. More species questioning their treaties. More cracks in the foundation of a system that had stood for 4,000 years. And at the center of it all, a species that everyone had dismissed as primitive, as harmless, as nothing. A private communication arrived for Voron. It was from Observer Lien of the Munara Collective, the quiet aquatic species that had always been too gentle and too powerless to challenge anyone. Her message was short. I tried to tell you. Years ago, I told you that the humans were not what they seemed. You did not listen. Voron did not respond to her. Instead, he opened a direct channel to Earth. To his surprise, it connected immediately. Taeho answered. He was still in his dark uniform, still calm, still composed. "What have you done?" Voron asked. His voice, for the first time in 300 years, was shaking. "We removed ourselves from a system that was designed to destroy us," Tejo said. "Nothing more. Your military capabilities, your technology. How long?" "Long enough, Grand Arbiter. Long enough that if we had wanted revenge, this conversation would not be happening. You would not be happening. None of you would." Voron was silent. "But that is not what we want," Tejo said. "It was never what we wanted." He ended the call. Voron stood alone in the emergency chamber. His aides watched him from the doorway, afraid to approach. The old Desik stared at the blank screen for a very long time. Then he whispered, to no one in particular, "What have we created?" Outside, the galaxy was burning with questions, and humanity, for the first time in 60 years, was no longer smiling. The days that followed were the most chaotic the galaxy had known in living memory. On 43 worlds, citizens took to the streets demanding answers from their governments. 3 species formally suspended their council membership pending investigation. 7 others began independent reviews of their own treaties. And what they found only made things worse. The evidence Earth had released was not exaggerated. If anything, it was restrained. The full truth was even uglier than what humanity had chosen to reveal. On the council station, Voron convened an emergency closed session with the 12 most senior delegates. The chamber was sealed. No aides, no recorders, no observers. Just the leaders of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations, sitting in a room that suddenly felt much smaller than it used to. "We need to discuss military options," said the delegate from the Thesic Assembly, Voron's own species. Voron shook his head, slowly. "There are no military options." The room erupted. Several delegates spoke at once, their voices overlapping in a mess of denial and anger. Voron let them talk. When they finally quieted, he brought up the tactical analysis his staff had prepared overnight. The numbers were devastating. Earth's hidden fleets outnumbered anything the Council could assemble in less than 6 months. Worse, the Council had no reliable intelligence on humanity's actual capabilities. For 60 years, every piece of information the galaxy had about Earth was information that Earth had deliberately chosen to share. The fake research papers, the stumbling conference presentations, the humble diplomatic requests, all of it had been performance. The Council's entire strategic picture of humanity was a carefully constructed lie, and they had believed every word of it. "We do not know what they can do," Voron said. "We do not know what they have built. We do not know where their ships are. And if the engagement with the Kaolori fleet is any indication, we do not even understand the technology they are using. We are blind." Rutha sat in his chair like a stone. His fleet, 400 of the Kaolori Dominion's finest warships, had been disabled in 11 minutes by a force 1/3 its size. His officers reported that the human weapons had bypassed their shields entirely, as if the shields did not exist. His engineers could not explain how. His intelligence officers could not explain how they had missed an entire armada hidden in deep space for decades. "Then we unite," Rutha said, his voice low and rough. "Every species, every fleet. We form the largest coalition in galactic history, and we crush them before they grow any stronger." "Crush them?" said a delegate from the Venari, a species known for their careful diplomacy. "With what? Have you read the reports from your own fleet? They let your ships live, Rutha. They could have destroyed all 400 of your vessels, and they chose not to. Does that sound like a species we can intimidate?" Rutha said nothing. "There is another problem," Voron added. "The leaked documents. Our own populations have seen them. Any military action against Earth right now would face massive opposition at home. The humans did not just challenge us militarily. They destroyed our credibility with our own people." The session ended without a resolution. For the first time in 4,000 years, the Galactic Council had no plan. On Earth, Secretary General Dohyun addressed the planet. Every screen on every continent carried his face. He was standing in a simple room, wearing a simple suit, and his voice was steady, but heavy with the weight of what he was saying. "I want to speak to you honestly," he said. "What we have done was not done lightly. For 60 years, your parents and grandparents and many of you carried a burden in secret. You smiled when you were mocked. You worked in silence while others took credit. You built something extraordinary in the darkness, and you did it because you believed that one day the truth would matter. That day has come." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "We did not want this. We spent 60 years trying every other way. We filed every petition. We attended every session. We played by every rule they wrote, even the ones designed to keep us down. There was no other way. I want you to understand that. There was no other way." In her laboratory, deep in the Oort cloud, Hana watched the address on a small screen, while her team completed the final calibrations on Project Blacktide. The project was not just weapons. It was a network of gravitational disruption satellites that had been quietly placed at key jump points across the galaxy over the past 15 years, disguised as space debris. When activated, these satellites could shut down faster than light travel in any sector Earth chose. It meant that humanity now held the keys to the galaxy's transportation network. Not a single ship could move at FTL speed without Earth's permission. Hana did not activate the full network. Instead, following Taeho's instructions, she activated a single satellite near the Council station. One jump point flickered offline for exactly 30 seconds. Then it came back on. That was all. No announcement, no threat. Just a quiet demonstration that every alien sensor in the area detected immediately. The message was understood. On the Council station, Jiho sat alone in the empty quarters that had once housed Earth's delegation. He had volunteered to stay behind as a diplomatic liaison, a single human on a station full of species who now looked to humanity with a mixture of fear and anger. He stared at the wall and felt the weight of everything pressing down on him. Taeho found him there via a secure communication channel. "Are you all right?" Taeho asked. "I do not know," Jiho said honestly. "I keep thinking about Ruth's face when he mocked us, and then I think about the Kalori ships drifting dead in space, and I wonder if we have become the thing we were fighting against." Taeho was quiet for a moment. "The fact that you are asking that question is exactly the difference between us and them. They never asked it. Not once in 4,000 years. "Is that enough?" Jiho asked. "It has to be," Taeho said, "because if it is not, then none of this means anything." In the weeks that followed, Nari's intelligence network reported something unexpected. Smaller species across the galaxy, the ones who had been exploited just as badly as Earth, but lacked the power to fight back, were reaching out through back channels. They wanted to talk. They wanted protection. They wanted to know if Earth's actions meant that things could actually change, or if one oppressor would simply be replaced by another. Earth did not ignore them. Observer Lian of the Munara Collective did something that surprised everyone, including herself. She stood before the full council and delivered a statement confirming that her own species' independent analysis supported Earth's accusations. The treaties were rigged. The system was corrupt. She had the data to prove it. She was censured immediately, her speaking privileges suspended, but the damage was already done. Her words were broadcast across the galaxy, and billions of beings heard an alien voice confirming what humanity had claimed. 3 days later, Voron received a private message from Taeho. It was not a threat. It was not a demand. It was not a list of grievances or conditions. It was a proposal. A detailed framework for a new treaty system, built from the ground up on principles of genuine equality, transparent governance, mutual respect, and shared benefit. Every clause was open, every term was negotiable. It was an invitation. Voron read it alone in his quarters. He read it 3 times. Then he set it down and stared out the window at the stars. For 4,000 years, the Council had maintained order through control, through hierarchy, through the careful management of power. And in all that time, no species had ever done what humanity was doing now. They were not trying to destroy the system. They were not trying to replace the Council with themselves. They had the power to do both, and everyone knew it. Instead, they were offering to build something better. Voron picked up the document again, and for the first time in a very long time, he did not know what to think. 1 year passed. It was not an easy year. There were arguments, threats, failed negotiations, and moments when it seemed like everything would collapse into war. Twice, Kalori hardliners attempted to rally a coalition against Earth. Twice, they failed. Not because of Earth's military power, though that certainly played a role, but because the galaxy's people had seen the truth, and they were not willing to unsee it. The old system was broken, and everyone knew it, and pretending otherwise was no longer possible. Slowly, painfully, something new began to take shape. The Galactic Council of Aligned Civilizations was formally dissolved on a quiet afternoon, without ceremony. In its place, 67 species led by a drafting committee that included humans, Munara, Vanari, and 11 other civilizations that had been exploited under the old system, created the Galactic Assembly of Sovereign Civilizations. The name was important. Every word had been argued over for weeks. Sovereign, because no species would ever again sign away its independence to join. And assembly, because this was a meeting of equals, not a hierarchy of masters and servants. The new assembly hall was built inside the same station, but it looked nothing like the old one. The old hall had been arranged in rising rings, with the powerful at the center and the weak at the edges. The new hall was circular, a single level. Every delegation sat at the same height, at the same distance from the center, facing each other. There was no back row. On the morning of the first grand session, Tejo walked through the corridor of the station. He had walked this corridor many times before, but today it felt different. Not because the walls had changed, they had not. But the way people moved through them had. Alien delegates who once would have looked past him, now looked at him. Some nodded. Some stopped to speak. A Venari diplomat clasped Tejo's hand in the gesture of greeting her species, reserved for those they considered worthy of respect. A young Pilkari researcher, barely a decade into his career, thanked Tejo for what Earth had done, his fungal body trembling slightly with emotion. Not everyone was friendly. Some delegates watched Tejo with hard eyes and tight mouths. The fear had not disappeared. Trust takes much longer to build than distrust, and there were many who wondered whether humanity's restraint was genuine or simply a more sophisticated form of control. Tejo understood this. He did not expect gratitude. He expected exactly what he saw, a galaxy that was cautious, hopeful, frightened, and uncertain, all at the same time. Jiho walked beside him, as he always did. But the young man who had once ground his teeth and shaken with anger was different now. He was calmer. He carried himself with a quiet confidence that came not from arrogance, but from having been tested and having survived it. He had spent the past year as Earth's sole representative on the station, navigating hostility and suspicion every single day, and he had done it with a grace that surprised even Tejo. Before the session began, Tejo met with Voron in a private room. The old Thesic had stepped down as Grand Arbiter. He held no official position in the new assembly. He was simply an elder now, an observer, a relic of a system that no longer existed. He looked older than Tahoe remembered. The plates of his shell had lost some of their shine, and his 4 eyes were duller than they used to be. "I want to say something to you," Voron began, "that I have never said to any being in 300 years. Tahoe waited. "You were patient when you had every right not to be. Your species endured humiliation and injustice for 60 years, and you did not break. You did not lash out. When you finally acted, you acted with more restraint than any civilization I have ever known." He paused. "I underestimated your kind. I dismissed you. I was wrong, and I will not make that mistake again." It was not exactly an apology. The Thesic did not apologize. But from Voron, it was more than anyone had ever received, and Tahoe understood its weight. "Thank you, Grand Arbiter," Tahoe said, using the old title deliberately, as a gesture of respect for what Voron had once been, even if the role no longer existed. Voron's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, something that might have been gratitude crossed his ancient face. In the assembly hall, the delegations gathered. Rutha was gone. His own government had removed him after the Kalori people discovered the full extent of their leadership's corruption and secret dealings with the old council. His replacement was a younger Kalori named Doshan, who spoke less and listened more, and who had made it clear that his people wanted a fresh start. Whether that was sincere or strategic, time would tell. Lien had been elected as the first moderator of the new assembly, a role specifically created to protect smaller and newer species from the kind of systemic exploitation that had defined the old council. She had been nominated by Earth. When she took her seat at the center of the circular hall, her soft blue skin shimmering under the lights, several delegations stood in a gesture of support. It was a small thing, but small things mattered now. Hana presented Earth's offer to the assembly. Humanity would share its advances in gravitational manipulation, quantum encryption, and biological engineering freely and openly, but with one condition. The knowledge must be distributed equally to every species. No exclusive deals. No powerful civilization hoarding breakthroughs while weaker ones fell behind. It was the exact opposite of how the old system had worked. And when Hana finished speaking, the hall was silent for a long moment, before someone from the Pilkari delegation began to clap. Others joined. It was not thunderous applause. It was something quieter and more meaningful. It was the sound of hope beginning to trust itself. Sunwar had repositioned the shadow fleets. They were no longer hidden. Their locations were shared openly with the assembly, and their mission had changed. They now patrolled the borders of the galaxy's most vulnerable civilizations, a protective force for species that had no fleets of their own. When a reporter from an alien news network asked Sunwoo why Earth was protecting species it had no obligation to defend, he answered simply, "Because no one did it for us." Nari had transformed her intelligence network into something new. The operatives who had once lived in shadows on alien worlds returned, but this time they came openly. They served as diplomatic liaisons, cultural bridges, and crisis mediators. On 30 worlds, human embassies opened for the first time, not as symbols of power, but as points of connection. On Earth, Do-hyun watched the first session of the new assembly on a screen in his office. He was alone. He had chosen not to attend in person because he believed this moment should belong to the people who had built it, not to the man who had simply given the order. When he saw the circular hall filled with hundreds of species, sitting as equals, he allowed himself a rare, small smile. An aide knocked and entered. "Sir, do you think it will last?" Do-hyun considered the question. "It will if we work at it," he said. "That is the whole point. Nothing good is effortless. The moment we stop trying is the moment it falls apart." In the assembly hall, Tahoe was called to speak. He walked to the center of the circular room, and stood where 1 year ago Voron had stood, to preside over a system built on inequality. Taeho did not give a grand speech. He gave a short one. "Thank you," he said, "for choosing a harder path. It would have been easier to go to war. It would have been easier to cling to the old system. It would have been easier to let fear win. You chose something more difficult. And I want you to know that Earth sees that, and we respect it." He looked around the room. Hundreds of faces, hundreds of species. Some old, some new, some friendly, some wary. All of them here, all of them equal. "Earth will never again sit quietly while injustice is called order," Taeho said, "and we will never ask any of you to sit quietly either. That is our promise, not as a powerful species to weaker ones, but as equals to equals." Then Lien, the moderator, raised her hand in the Munara gesture of acknowledgement, and one by one, delegates across the room did the same, each in the manner of their own species. Some raised hands, some bowed, some touched their chests, some simply closed their eyes. It was not unity, not yet. It was something smaller and more honest. It was a beginning. From above, if someone had been watching, they would have seen the circular hall filled with light, with hundreds of different species sitting together at the same level, facing each other without hierarchy, without a back row, without a center of power. And among them, in no special place, with no special seat, sat the human delegation. Not at the back, not at the front, just among equals, exactly where they belonged.